Hi, how's it going? This is your review. I know we spoke in class, and we took a look at some of this stuff. So some of this, I'm I'm sure will be a review of that. I'm gonna figure out where it loops because it seems to loop like a bunch of times. So I'm just gonna. Uh, okay. So maybe this is frame number one. Let's say. So I'm gonna bracket it there. And maybe this. Yeah, so I'm going to say those two are the same. You know, there's a slight difference in them, but it's negligible. I don't think it matters. When you actually do your loop, you want to make sure that, of course, all the frames here are the same. At least if you're just doing a single cycle of it. But yeah, let's take a look. So, you know, we spoke about it in class a little bit where you're saying, how do I get this to not look so robotic? And I love those kinds of questions because it shows that your eye is seeing what's going on. And we were talking about the arm specifically, but I think, you know, just a lot of this is going to be about like tracking arcs, at least while your foot, I mean, I think all your poses are looking correct, right? So now it's just about massaging the timing and the spacing of how it interpolates from pose to pose. So once your foot plants here, like let's say this looks like your plant, the whole time your foot is moving this way, the plant foot, that is a horrible arrow. Let's just pretend that's a nice looking arrow. You want to make sure that this movement is fairly consistent, and it seems like there's even, okay, so this is on ones, but then it seems like it goes to twos. And there are the legs, yeah, okay. So that's going to affect how it appears when you play it back, of course. So I'm not sure if if you want to go to spline and put everything on ones, of course that's okay. But when you do, just make sure that the distance this foot is moving in this direction is fairly consistent. You know, it's hard to tell because I could just guess at where the interpolation is, but it should be fairly consistent all the way until the foot picks up off the ground. So let's say here. Yeah, that looks like the other in between. All right, so a couple tiny pose notes here is I would make sure this foot is planted on the ground. I would maybe try to rotate your pelvis down so that we can get a little nicer of a line that comes from this leg like into your torso. It's a small note. Let's see. I think it'll also help here if you open up the hips a little bit, if you rotate it back, because this leg looks a little strained. It looks a little, I don't know, like a little hyperextended maybe. So if you rotate the hips back and also maintain that like downward hip change, it's going to give you a nicer sweep from that leg into the torso. By sweep, I mean a nicer like little line of action and stuff like that. Just tiny little things, you know. This looks good from this angle, you know, but yeah, I don't know. Anyways, talking about things that focusing on the big picture stuff here. Also, if adjusting the pelvis doesn't help at all, you may have to just rotate this a little bit more so that this leg doesn't look so entirely straight. And keep that rotation going here. But I would almost say here like the leg isn't straight enough. You know what I'm trying to say? So just play with that when the leg is fully in the back position. It doesn't have to be super 100% straight, but it should like the leg is not going to want to pick up off the ground, and the character is not going to want to take that step until they absolutely have to. You know, so whatever you can do, kind of straighten out the leg right here would be fantastic. Okay, cool. And the same kind of pose notes apply to the other side of your walk here. I wouldn't hate to see that lifted up a little bit more. You know, in both these poses, maybe you can tip it up a little. It's a tiny exaggeration probably from what real people do when they walk, but I think it may be appropriate. That's just my aesthetic. Like we talked about in the arms, you know, you gotta like really pay attention to your spacing here and how one pose compares to the next. And that's going to be reflected in the curves, but your curves are a little hard because you're using that arm twist stuff. They're a little hard to interpolate, you know what I mean? I feel kind of like there's a really big jump in your clavicle or your shoulder from this pose to this pose. Like here it's back and starting to move forward, and then it like jumps kind of a lot to the next one. So I would just take a look at the curves for that shoulder and make sure that that's a little bit more, you know, it's fine to have the poses stacked up at either extreme, but what you want is to have kind of like a logical progression in the middle, right? So I feel like kind of in the middle, like maybe we're doing some close stuff and then a big jump, and then it kind of slows down a little bit. You know, it feels like the spacing in there is inconsistent on that shoulder, so I would just check that out, do an audit. But of course, all of this should start with, and I probably should have started with this, making sure that your pelvis is doing what you want it to do as far as like the up and down. And when I look at it, I know I'm a little zoomed in here. I feel like the curves in the up and down, make sure your spacing are good, is good on there, because when I watch it play, it seems pretty even. And maybe I can go in here. We can take a look at how the spacing is on this stuff. Again, my sketching over it isn't super accurate, and also we're on ones for part of it and twos for other part of it. But I'll turn on ghosting and we'll take a look to see how things play out. Yeah, so there it feels like we're spending a little bit of time at the top, but maybe this jump here is a little too strong. But again, it's on twos. So I'm just going to say, hey, pay attention to it as you get this like fully splined, because it's hard for me to analyze the how the spacing is going to work once you have some interpolation or some keys in between there. It's just something to pay attention to make sure that start with this first. Get this right first, and then work on the legs, because working on the legs before you get this center of gravity worked out is going to be work that you just have to kind of like redo. Yeah, I see your note about fixing the knee pops, and I can give you a hand. If you want to sign up for office hours, that would be no problem at all. But don't overly worry about the knee pops, like until we get the center of gravity correct, until you're sure that your foot spacing here is moving back properly. Knee pops is kind of like some of the final steps of cleanup on a shot. Yeah. So the other stuff, you know, is just like the spacing on the arms, like we talked about. I traced your arms, but I never really turned on ghosting to analyze how that spacing is working out. But see how all of these, like when I step through it, all of the spacing on this upper arm looks fairly even. You know what I mean? Through this part. And that's what's kind of giving you your robotic-y feel. Because robots, you know, when we say robot, we're kind of talking about motors. And when a motor turns on and starts to move something, it tends to move at a very consistent speed once it gets up to speed, right? And so that's why, and it's able to change directions without having to like really slow down all that much. So that's why you're kind of getting that feeling. So if that arm swing was, if it eased into the motion a little bit more, then it can also ease out of that motion a bunch. And then it's going to feel a little bit more organic and a little bit more natural. Like I wouldn't, you know, we talked about the elbow stuff straightening as well. I'm going to get a different color because I'm starting to draw over my drawings. But maybe I'll talk about it in this back half. Like if the arm is more, or maybe this is a fine bend to have in the arm. Maybe it could be a little bit reduced. I don't know. It's up to you. But what we're really looking for is that change. So once you have your top arm kind of more spaced in a way that makes it feel less robotic-y, you can loosen it up even more by having the hand like drag. So we can see like the arm from here to here is starting to go down. And when that happens, we want the hand to like keep going up just a little bit. And you're going to do that by just increasing this bend a little bit from what it was when the hand was coming forward, you know. And here, even if this is your upper arm, you can still keep this bend increased a little. And to the degree of this is how floppy it's going to make your arm feels. But you can see like that hand is going to kind of ease out of this motion after, delayed, after the upper arm has eased out of that motion, which is sort of, you know, you're talking about offsetting keys. You can build in the offset into the poses. Like you don't have to just do it through offsetting keys and interpolation. And then at some point, you know, at the back half, you're going to want to inverse it. So I'll show the inverse. Like this is the point where your arm starts moving forward. This is where your hand is. When the arm starts moving forward, you can like straighten. You can start straightening the arm to keep the hand's moving this way while the top of the arm is moving that way. And that's going to loosen it up. You know what I mean? And you have to make sure that you get some nice eases when the hand changes directions, like all the same principles apply. But that'll help your arm feel loose if you do stuff like that. Yep, let's take a look. I've been focusing a lot on the side view. So let me see what's going on the front view. On the front view, I feel like you really feel like the robotic nature of the arms a bit more. And some of that's going to be able to be resolved by kind of changing not just the, like I'll draw it on the side view. I feel like, you know, this is being animated, the forward and back swing. But from the side view, I'm not really seeing the hands come in and out as it progresses front and back. You know what I mean? So like maybe, like here it looks like the thumb might be intersecting, you know, the hip right there. So that would be a good reason to kind of rotate all of this out and have the hand come out at least enough to like clear the body. So from a top-down view, this is going to, I'm sure this is going to be one of the greatest drawings ever known to man. Let's say this is your fellow, and this is your torso of your fellow. You know, the arms aren't just going to go straight like this. They're going to kind of like arc around the body. Because if you think about the shoulder being the pendulum here, it swings. It also is kind of forming a circle, or at least a semicircle here from front and back position. And this can even be like a figure 8. You know, it can do all sorts of crazy stuff. That's terrible. I'm going to undo that. But let's see. Your hand could come forward and it could swing in front, and then it could go back and swing like this path. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to just be like a perfect semicircle like what I've drawn here. And that's going to really help loosen it up and feel organic if it kind of takes a different path in the forward swing here as it does in the back swing here. And you're you're really going to see it more from the front view than you would ever see it from the side view. I hope that that concept makes sense. And then also, even on all these swings too, like, you know, you're going to have a little lateral motion on your hand if you start designing these arcs, and that's going to need, you know, attention to your spacing as well, like eases in and eases out. Kind of like what you did on the feet, which is great. Like there's a little, you have a little bit of side to side motion on them. Really cool. Love to see it. Yeah, really cool. And then I'm not sure, I'm not seeing like any up and down motion on the head, you know, or rotate in this kind of configuration. I think that that will help loosen up your head too. And I would pay attention to like follow through and overlap on that, where again, it's the same ideas with the hands. When your torso is starting to raise up, the head may still be rotating down for a couple frames, you know, because like there's this force that's like being pushed up through the body here that will cause the head maybe to like tip from this position maybe to something subtle like here. It's not, it doesn't have to be a huge move. And then the same is true when the body starts to like go down here, you can have the head continue up. So maybe in the next few frames it's just tipped back this way ever so slightly, and that'll give your head like a little loose feel to it. Yeah, but overall I think that you are narrowing in on a final walk. You're getting close, you're getting there. I think, you know, feel free to spline it. I may, you know, suggest tiny things like maybe push the center of gravity over so it looks like the weight is a little bit more over this foot. You know what I mean? It'll really help sell the weightiness of this thing and have a little bit more. I think you have some in there now, but it's pretty subtle. A little more side to side action. I know this all just gets, it looks like I just put a ton of graffiti all over everywhere, but anyways, this is looking good. I think keep splining it, keep doing things on spline it out. You don't have to have held keys anymore. And as you're splining this over the next maybe week or two, think about your next assignment and what you may want to do. As far as, you could do a personality walk, you could do some other kind of physical action of, you know, picking up a heavy object or a throw, or, you know, whatever. There's really like sky's the limit. If there's anything that's directly sort of applicable to your thesis, we could practice something on that, like from that before you get there. But yeah, I don't know, just give it some thought. And, you know, keep your eye open for reference or start thinking about what might be a good reference. But anyways, yeah, thanks for submission and see you next week.